Hi, this is Rabbi Orlofsky, and welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Whether you're watching with our friends over at Torah and Yiddishkeit, who of course are the new producers of the show, or wherever you watch or listen to your podcast, as always, we're happy to have you along for the experience. And we have a sponsor this week who is the same sponsor as last week. So I'm reading the same sponsorship. Hi, Rabbi. Thank you for your fresh and very practical perspective on Torah and Yiddishkeit. In particular, your reframing of the Aguna crisis into a choice between marriage versus pilegesh was excellent. It's a great example of how the world uses inflammatory positioning to get us to lose sight of the ikkur issue. Keep up the great work. Canada Rosens. Thank you very much. Okay, so I've mentioned this many times, that when I'm about to give a podcast, I mean, this is over 6 years now. We're almost done with our 6th year of this podcast. So when you have a podcast where you're doing the parasha, okay, so there's lots of stuff to talk about. If you're doing a political podcast, there's lots of stuff to talk about. If you're doing an interview show, they just keep bringing on different people, right? But if it's just me sitting here and talking about whatever I feel like, so I went through all of my main kvetches, during the first 4 years. So now I find new things to kvetch about, but it's tricky. And because, as often happens, I meet people who have committed to memory everything I have ever said, which I find incredibly frightening. So I remember I had somebody sitting in on the podcast once, friend of the show, and at the end he says, "I didn't hear one thing new." So let me say, first of all, that Rabbi Dr. Avram Tversky famously said, "I wrote 40 books, but I didn't really. I wrote one book 40 times." And same you cite. I remember once I heard Rav Moshe Shapiro give a shir, and I said to Rabbi Yosef Brown, who was much more involved with Rav Moshe than I was, and I said, "He said this shir 3 years ago." And he says, "No, he didn't. He changed this and he changed that," which I thought was fascinating. So he said, "Look, a painter has only so many colors on his palette, but he can paint an endless array of paintings." I thought that was interesting because it's true, right? If you read a particular author, he has a particular way of writing, and all of his books will be basically the same. If you listen to certain musicians, and there's a certain theme to their music, and although they might do slight variation on it, but there's a general way that their music works and how they do it. You think about this for yourself. I'm not talking about, artists who are singers and buy songs. I'm talking about people who write their own songs. You can hear a certain common thread in A.B. Rottenberg's music. You can hear a certain common thread in the Miami Boys Choir. There's certain tunes that you hear that sound like they have a certain reflection. Comedians, some of them have a certain style. People used to make fun of Seinfeld all the time. He'd say, "You ever notice? You ever notice? Hey, how about that? Hey, you ever notice?" He says he never actually ever said that. But that's the perception. The perception is that he has a certain type of humor. Stephen Wright, everything is very deadpan, and that's the way that they have it. Everyone has a particular style. So obviously, I only have one shir. I only have one idea, and that's bringing across Torah in a positive way to get people to appreciate Avas Hashem and to appreciate the relationship we're supposed to have and to grow and to become better. And that's more or less what I try to do. But obviously, you have to take the colors and make a different painting. There's a lot of different variations that you can make with it. So, as I often do before I record a show, I ask the people around me, what should I talk about? And my wife says, why are you asking me? You never use anything I say. It's not true, I said. There have been times I use what you say, And so she did something which she's been doing more and more often. My wife is much younger than me. Now, the truth is, she's only 3 years younger than me, and not even a full 3 years. I was 23 when I got married. She was 20. But her birthday's in November, mine's in January. It's less than 3 years. But somehow she's so much more happening than I am. I was always an old man. From the time I was young, I was a fuddy-duddy. I remember when I started getting frum, so my father used to say to me, why do you dress like an undertaker? I was in the Hebrew Academy of Nassau County, which was a co-ed high school. It wasn't like a black and white yeshiva, but I dressed more conservatively and, somber clothing, less color. My dad, he was a real fashion plate, this was during the early 70s, he had all the hip clothing and stuff like that, and I was wearing dark, somber suits, and calling everyone my child, In fact, I saw someone recently, they said, oh, you look exactly the same. I said, yeah, because I made sure to age early, so I always look this way. So yeah, I don't change much because, that's basically what it was. I never had like a really youthful look. I was just always an old man, an old kvetchy man, I finally, my age has just caught up to me. When I was in my 40s, I remember the senior citizen on the bus got up to give me a seat. There's something about me. It's just an old man vibe that I give off, But my wife, first of all, she apparently, she denies it, but I'm pretty sure she made a deal with the devil and sold her soul so that she remains looking young. She doesn't age. She goes out with my daughters and they think she's one of the sisters and they're always shocked to find out how old she is. I remember on our 25th wedding anniversary when we went out, so we took our baby with us because he was still an infant, and he was our, our Ben Zekundim, So we took him with us. So this couple there, we went, of course, to the Galitzans, which we love. We like going to the Galitzans. I think they fixed it up. And when we used to go there, they didn't. But we liked the view. We liked being near the sea. And we liked the fact that they have a 24-hour tea room where you can always have a piece of cake and a cup of coffee. That, to me, is a Heimish hotel, Anyway, we went there for Shabbos. And I remember we asked the travel agent, I said, which Mahadran hotels are available? And she gave us a list. And I said, what about the Galitzans? They said, I thought you wanted a hotel. I think they fixed it up since then. But anyway, so we're in the dining room, Shabbos, and this woman says to my wife, looks at the baby, says, oh, is that your first? And she says, no, it's my 11th. She goes, oh my goodness, you look so young. And then she looks at me, and then she turns back to my wife and says, you look so young. No one ever says that to me, When I came in, when our last kid was born, I came to the hospital, the nurse said, Sababa, Grandpa's here. So I was always been around the time. I think email existed for, 15 years till I got an email account, and it took me a very long time to catch up with new technology. In fact, I just met with somebody who told me I need somebody to manage my social media account. He does this for a living. And there's no way that I'm going to produce enough money to pay his salary to be able to do it. He's very good at it. But he says you have to get an Instagram account and you have to get a TikTok TikTok account, and you have to keep putting up little shorts, and that's what people watch today. You give a long-form podcast, you go and you talk for an hour, and not everybody wants to listen to that. You need YouTube shorts and little short things like this. I don't know what these things are, you know. I don't know what an Instagram account is. Everybody has an Instagram account. I don't really know. I have email, you know. That's pretty good. My kids put me on WhatsApp, and everyone always complains I never read the WhatsApps, you know, because it's just so many of them, you know. It's just too much to be able to keep up with, you know. And people go back and forth, you know, and then there's voice notes and stuff. It's too complicated for me, just, you know. I remember Jackie Mason when email first came out, you know, he says people are emailing, and then they call up the guy, did you get my email? And I remember when they first came out with these texting things, and, you know, I can't text like that. My kids can, like, you know, so I'm sitting there, like, texting, you know, I'm going slowly looking for the letters, you know, and I was like, when are you coming? Yeah. And then I get back like a 3-page note, like, you know, in about 12 seconds. I don't know how they do it. So after a while, I just give up and I call them. Why am I doing this, you know? So that's because I'm old. I heard this comic once say, you know, my generation, we're like addicted to our phones. It says, my parents have phones, but they just use it to make calls. Says, that's an app on my phone, and I'm upset if you use it without texting me first to see if you can call me, you know? So what can I tell you? You know, I grew up with phones that were wired to the wall with a dial. Zoom, boom, 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 zoom, boom, 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 zoom, 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 zoom. And that's how we used to make phone calls, you know? When they came up with, you know, phones that you could carry around without being attached to the thing, you know, it was unbelievable. Portable phones, you know. And then cell phones. It took me years to get a cell phone. For years, I put off getting a cell phone because I said, well, what do I need? You know, why do I need a cell phone? And someone said to me, this way people can reach you anywhere at any time. I said, now remind me again why I would want a cell phone, you know. My wife always said, if I want to reach you during the day, I said, I call in from time to time. It's okay, you know. And then I broke down on the Tel Aviv highway with my mother. And my mother said, you're getting a cell phone. No man can stand up to a combined attack of his mother and his wife. So I got myself a cell phone. And I would say 99 to 99.9% of the phone calls are not necessary. You know, on those rare occasions, you know, where you have a real emergency, okay, it's good to have one. But how often does that really come up? I would say just the opposite. More accidents are caused by cell phones than by people who don't have cell phones to call up afterwards. But okay, I'm old. We've established that. You know, when I stopped teaching seminary maybe 12 years ago, my daughter still teaches in seminaries, and she said to me, Abba, it's a good thing you left because the world has changed and you haven't. It's true. I haven't. I have a regular way of looking at the world and a very simplistic approach, and yeah, it's true. I'll talk about this next week when I want to talk about the 9 days, but I'm just saying all this by introduction, because I said to my wife, what should I speak about? So my wife, who, as I mentioned, is much more happening than I am, she says, I'll ask ChatGPT. So, okay, I've never used ChatGPT in my life. It's artificial intelligence. Most of the people that I've taught over the years don't even have human intelligence, nevertheless artificial intelligence. You know, somebody claims that I said this line, I have no recognition of ever saying it, you know. You say, oh, you're just brainwashing us. And he says, no, I'm trying to find a brain, and if I find it, maybe I can wash it. But right now, I can't even locate it. You know, I'm from the old days when you could say, you know, little rough things to you, tell me. Somebody asked a really stupid, we were doing Mishnayos at Megillah, and we were doing all the Ein Bains, you know, in Megillah. Ein Bain, Nedel in the Dava Ella, Ein Bain, Yerushalayim l'Shilo Elo, all these kind of things. So, I don't know, he asked some kind of really ridiculous question, even knew it was ridiculous. And I said, that's called Ein Brain, yeah? It was just a throwaway line. The name stuck with him for 20 years. I have to have my mouth, registered as a lethal weapon, I don't know, sometimes I say things. But anyway, so my wife says, I'll ask Chat GTP. And I really feel like I need to share this with you. This is what she wrote. What would be a good topic for Rabbi Dovid Orlofsky to speak about on his next podcast? Now, first of all, full disclosure, I know ChatGPT knows who I am because my son told me that his friend asked ChatGPT, he says, I want to listen to a shir, the one that would be kind of funny and relaxing and be meaningful, I'm not looking to stress out. Can you make a suggestion? He goes, well, of course, you want the shiurim of Rabbi Dovid Orlofsky. So I know that, artificial intelligence is aware of me and they're coming for me. Hello, Hal. So, what would be a good topic for Rabbi Dovid Orlofsky to speak about on his next podcast? Here are several strong topic ideas that would fit Rabbi Dovid Orlofsky's signature style, combining Torah insight, practical life guidance, and humor, depending on his goals for the episode. Torah and personal growth. How to be frum and normal. A classic Orlofsky-style blend of humor and insight on balancing religious seriousness with being emotionally healthy and socially normal. The art of tshuva all year long. Making tshuva a daily habit, not just a Rosh Hashanah panic project. How to talk to Hashem when you don't know what to say. On real personal tefillah, not just checking off the siddur. I don't know what that means, checking off the siddur, but okay. For younger listeners or singles, why you're not married yet and why that might be okay. With the classic Rabbi Orlofsky spin, emuna, effort, and self-worth. Surviving shidduch season with your sanity intact. A practical and spiritual roadmap to managing pressure and keeping perspective. Parenting and chinuch. Raising kids with emuna, not just rules. Focusing on transmitting values in a way that sticks. What yeshiva didn't teach you about building a bayis neman b'Yisrael, real-life relationship and communication skills from a Torah outlook. Here's the last category it gives me. Light but deep. Does Hashem want me to be happy? Torah sources on simcha and whether it's a real avoda. Judging favorably, a lost mitzvah. Exploring the mitzvah of Dan Lekaf Zchus in today's quick-to-condemn world. If you're not growing, you're coasting, and that's dangerous. Avoiding spiritual stagnation in an overstimulated generation. Would you like a more specific theme based on the season, Elul, Tisha B'Av, summer break, or a specific audience? So then I asked him to write a Rabbi Orlofsky joke. They weren't very funny. I didn't even bother writing them down because, they definitely don't have Rabbi Orlofsky's signature style of humor and cleverness and insight. Now, let me tell you what I got out of this experience. First thing I said to my wife is, can you send this to me? She goes, which topic are you going to use? I said, nothing. I'm going to read this. Because AI is changing the world. And everyone knows this. Yeah? I'll give you an example. One that's close to my heart. One that makes me very disturbed on a very primal level. Hertz Rent-A-Car is starting to use AI to check for damage. And suddenly there's a small little ding in the car and they charge you for it. Because the AI checks the whole car over and sees every little nick and ping that's in the car. It used to be that, you can overlook some little things, but not AI. Yeah? AI is starting to fill in so many areas. Somebody told me, and I didn't check this out because I'm not Pesach Kron, but someone told me that they went to a few doctors and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with them. And they went to ChatGPT and it diagnosed them correctly, something that nobody had caught. And it was able to do a better job than all of these real-life doctors. There's a lot of professions that are about to be replaced by AI. And the world changes. That's just the reality. You can complain about it, but it doesn't make a difference. So the Rabbi Orlofsky show audience continues to grow, but we're still conservatively at 25,000 people, maybe 30,000. I'm not sure. I have to get all the numbers because I keep meeting people who call up on Torah Anytime to listen on the phone. I don't have those numbers. I met a lot of people who do that. So I don't have the internet. I do call up. I listen. So I'm not sure how many people there are. I should ask ChatGPT how many people actually watch the show. Maybe they can figure it out for me. But but people were telling me, if you want to really reach a lot of people, you have to be like these rabbis. And he showed me a bunch of rabbis who are on Instagram, and they put up these 5-minute little videos, and they have hundreds of thousands of views. I think it's amazing. Amazing. It's a forum. Look, there was a time when I used to leave my house on a busy day. Not every day was like this, but on a busy day. I'd leave the house at 6:45. I'd go and daven. I'd go straight to Or Samech to teach from 9:15 till 1:15, and then I would run across town to teach in seminary from like 2 to 5, and then I would run back to Or Samech to teach my parsha, and then I would run out and daven Ma'ariv, and then I would teach an Ola Gola at night. I'd get home at 10:15 at night. And then I had all the phone calls to return and things like that. And I was busy. When I lost all of my jobs through my wit and personality, and I ended up becoming a speaker and going around different places talking, occasionally I'd have a large audience, I spoke in the Javits Center to like 1,000 people. That was unusual. I spoke Shavas V'Tammuz. I'll never forget this. I every now and then would make my own shir and charge at the door. So I was making a shir in Muncie on Sunday Shavas V'Tammuz. This was a bunch of years ago. And another organization wanted to piggyback and take my event for me. They said, we'll pay the rental, we'll pay the flyers, we'll pay the ads, etc., and we'll take the event and we'll sponsor the event and one of our people will speak beforehand. I said, okay, just tell me what you want to do. Do you want to pay me my regular fee, or do you want to keep the gate, when people come and pay? He says, no, how many people are you going to get already? We'll let you keep the gate. 500 people turned up. Turned out that was a poor investment strategy on their part. They wanted to change the arrangement afterwards. I said, hey, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Anyway, I got 500 people. I have the schus of having a kesher with Rabbi Foyer, and he was a Rav in Muncie for many years. And I mentioned this to him. He says, a Sunday Shavas V'Tammuz, big deal. Anybody could have done that. There's nothing for people to do. No one goes to work. Everyone's just hanging around. Of course, they'll come and speak. He says, I could have gotten double that. But that was a big audience. Like I said, Or Samech had an event at the Javits Center. I spoke for 1,000 people. I spoke in the Shmiras HaLashon event in Yerushalayim when they used to have it. 3,000 women. But every week I sit here and I speak to 25,000 people. That's a big crowd. That's an arena to fill up 25,000 people. Can you imagine if we got them all together? Yeah. And the idea that this person was trying to tell me is, and if you market it right, you can reach 100,000 people, 300,000 people, which is just mind-boggling. The whole concept of what you can do today is just amazing. You know, people used to write a newsletter and send it out, you know, even have an email group or a WhatsApp group, you know, but to be able to sit and speak about mostly Divrei Torah and some other stuff, whatever happens to occur to me, and to be able to reach this amount of people, the change that this does in the world is beyond imagination. For most of human history, if you wanted to write something, you took a piece of cloth or papyrus or, you know, eventually had some form of paper, and you stood there with a quill and an inkwell and you wrote on it. Yeah? That is how, when my mom went to school, they still had inkwells until the 1950s. That's what you used. You had inkwells. You might have a fountain pen, you know, but that was it. You write on it, get smudged. There would be like fine sand that they would sprinkle on it or something so that it would set. An amazing thing. When lahavdil, when you read Les Miserables or War and Peace, and you realize, or any Dickens novel, and you realize they're sitting there with a piece of paper and dipping the quill and writing word by word. What an avoda. And then in the 1400s, Gutenberg came up with a printing press. Yeah, it's a big step forward. And now you could set the type and put it on the ink and on the paper. You could print thousands of copies, theoretically hundreds of thousands of copies, until you had to erase the ink, you know, wash it off, take all the little letters, put it back in their boxes, and set up the next page, which was also a tremendous avoda. Yeah, but at least there were books, and books could get around, and books and periodicals. And there are those people who say that this is one of the things that changed history, because now I could say something, and that pamphlet, like they would say during Revolutionary time, war times in America, you know, these pamphleteers would put out these pamphlets and they would spread around, and people would see them and get ideas that otherwise you just had word of mouth to be able to spread around and to be able to spread all these ideas. Lahavdil, the thousands of pages of Gemara that they sat there and wrote out with the little quill on the little paper. Now you could print a Shas. A person could get a Shas, get a copy of a Shas. It was an amazing thing. Today, forget about it. All right, so then they came out with a telephone. Right? Now I can talk to somebody, because until then you would write a letter and you would send it, and it would take however long, 6 months to get there. During, again, the Revolutionary War in America, you know, so they would send a letter to the king and then wait, you know, months for it to get there, months to get an answer back. You know, so now you can pick up a phone and talk to somebody miles away, hundreds of miles away, thousands of miles away. What a change. What an unbelievable thing. And then, of course, they came up with what we have today, where you just type and a little image comes in and you can print it, you can send it, you can bring it out there, you can spread to millions of people an idea. The Rambam writes that by the Churban, we were trying to bring certain basic ideas to the world, and most of the world had not accepted it. Meaning, in the year 70, whether you were dealing with the Roman Empire or the Parthian Empire or any of the Germanic peoples or the Pacific Islands or the natives in North America, it didn't matter. Everybody were Ovdei Avodah Zarah. Everybody were polytheistic and believed in the pantheon of gods. We were the only people teaching this concept of one God. So the Rambam famously says that Christianity and Islam came onto the scene to prepare the nations of the world for basic Jewish concepts. So now, a lot of people in the world believe that there's one God, that He created the world in 6 days, that He gave the Torah to the Jews on Mount Sinai, that eventually He's going to bring a Messiah that's going to bring perfection to the world. All of these things are now accepted by billions of people on the face of the earth. Yeah? Monty Berger, when he was teaching in Discovery, he tells the story that, one time a guy says to him at the end of the Discovery seminar, he says, okay, I hear what you have to say here in the Jewish quarter. He says, but there are 3 other quarters here in Jerusalem. I want to hear what they have to say. He says, I'll save you time. The Christians, the Muslims, and the Armenians all believe that God created the world and gave the Torah to the Jewish people on Mount Sinai. The only people who give me any trouble are the Jews. This is the only place where I get a hard time. I think it was Shia Cohen who was once on a plane, and this woman said, the Jews are the chosen people. And he said, yeah. God gave the Bible to the Jews on Mount Sinai. He says, yeah. He says, every Christian believes that. How come Jews don't believe it? So he says, because you can believe it and do whatever you want. If we believe it, we have to keep Shabbos, we have to keep kosher, we have a whole bunch of obligations that come along with it. So, it's hard for us to realize it. But the majority of the world recognizes what the Torah concepts are that exist, so that when Mashiach comes, He's not starting from scratch. He's not coming into a world of Ovdei Avodah Zarah. For the most part, people do not take Avodah Zarah seriously anymore. There are places, there are things that are considered Avodah Zarah. Yeah. I had a guy in Or Sameach who was in one of the highest levels in Tai Chi. Now, Tai Chi, as far as I know, is just another fancy way of beating people up, which is what I find interesting, these self-defense things, Woody Allen used to tell a joke that he went to one of these self-defense courses and he didn't have what it takes, so he used to just pay the instructor to walk him home at night, But, karate, judo, jiu-jitsu, all these kind of things. So it's another one. So this person who was high up, he says, no, it's mamash avodah zarah. I said, what are you talking about? He says, it's all about your energy. He says, so when you reach the highest level, listen to this, when you reach the highest level of Tai Chi, you have to perform the tea ceremony, wherein you make a cup of tea and you put your energy into it. I said, did you reach that level? He says, no, but I reached the level where I was invited to participate in someone else's tea ceremony. I said, what happened? He goes, I don't know what I was drinking, but it wasn't tea. Yeah. This is coffee. You could trust me on that. W.C. Fields famously used to carry a flask with him. When people asked what was in it, he'd say, it's orange juice. And of course it was whiskey, So one time someone took his flask and poured it out and filled it with orange juice, So he takes a swig, he spits it out, he says, who switched my orange juice with orange juice? But for the most part, how seriously can you take Avodah Zarah when Thor is a member of the Avengers? You understand? Like, how do you look at the gods the same way, when you try to take them seriously? Yeah. So, Hercules is a Disney movie. No one can actually take Avodah Zarah seriously. I'm sure I must have mentioned this in the past, but Rav Dovid Cohen once was answering questions for AJOP, the Association of Jewish Outreach Professionals. I heard a recording of it. And someone asked him, these out-of-town yeshivas were asked to teach Greek and Roman mythology. Are we allowed to teach it? And he says, yes. Because, did you ever wonder why our months are named after Babylonian gods? Because once Bavel fell, everyone realized that their gods were a joke. And so the fact that we name our months after them is making chayzik of the Avodah Zarah. So there's anybody who thinks the gods live up on Mount Olympus and actually, have any power, like you read in the Iliad and the Odyssey, where the gods are intervening in man's affairs. I mean, nobody believes that stuff. No one believes that, Thor was drinking the ocean from a cup. I mean, these things are way beyond us. So people have come around to this idea of understanding. And with all of the effectiveness of these two franchises that have been going around and teaching about the basic questions of Judaism, what you can do today with these internet tools to be able to reach, I'm saying millions, but apparently the most popular guy out there is this guy called Mr. Beast. I think he has 1 billion followers. 1 billion people are watching this guy. I'll never forget when Pesach Krohn was quoting an article from Reader's Digest and about Mo Feuerstein. They had written an article. He says, this was in Reader's Digest. It has, I forgot how many millions of subscribers. Halavai by Mir, he says. The two biggest selling Jewish novels in history, I assume in recent history. I don't know if there were more copies in the time of the, when the printing press came out. But as far as we know, is All for the Boss and It's Tzaddik in Our Time. I think they sold 100,000 copies. Yeah, that's like if someone told me if you write a frum novel and you get 5,000, you sell 5,000 copies, that's already considered a great seller. So to be able to reach 1 billion people, be able to sit and to be able to say this is unbelievable. What's the problem? So this person I was meeting with, he says, you need someone to open you up an Instagram account and a TikTok account, I said, well, I don't have Instagram. He says, don't get it. He says, because I have it. And you just spend all day scrolling. Just scrolling, and looking at all the postings. Now, I don't know if I would necessarily do that. Like I say, I don't even look at all my WhatsApps, because there's just too many of them. But people say it's highly addictive. And you get caught into it, and you just go from one to the next, to the next, to the next, and it doesn't stop. I spoke to somebody who said to me, I went on to YouTube Shorts, and one just goes into the next, goes into the next, goes into the next, and I turn around, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. It just sucks you in. So it's not like you could just turn around and look up something. There was this comedian, I heard a routine, when I go to America, sometimes I get, can I tell you, everyone knows me already, no secrets by me. When I rent a car, sometimes it comes with satellite radio. And they have this comedy station where they have little, bits from different comedians. Yeah, I listen to it sometimes, especially when I'm driving late at night, keep me up. You don't want to fall asleep at the wheel. My good friend, Dovid Charedim, drove me back one night from Baltimore, and it was really pretty late. And I said, are you going to be able to stay up? Because I don't know if I can stay up. He goes, don't worry. And he turns on this loud Mexican music. He says, there's no way to sleep through this. I turn a little comedy bits. So this guy was talking about, he was so old back when there was like a BlackBerry, And he says, he says, I look at my BlackBerry when I'm driving and it's really not, So he says, comedian so-and-so died in a fiery car crash. He was looking up on his BlackBerry whether so-and-so had appeared in a particular movie. Spokesman for this actor said, that in fact he did appear in the movie, and hopes that this will avoid any other movie-related accidents. But I saw a short film once of people who killed people while they were texting, and they were talking to the murderers, and they were like, I just went to send this message. He goes, but if you would have said to me, you're driving down the highway, close your eyes for 10 seconds. I would say, well, are you crazy? He says, but that's what I do every time I look down to text. And people get stuck. Who get stuck in these things. So, like all things, something can be used as a tool for unbelievable habotzes HaTorah, and also can be used for terrible things. And it has that danger of that form. So I guess if you're going to become addicted to Instagram, it would be better if you're addicted to Rabbi Orlofsky shorts. Now, there are certain places out there that, they put up like a minute from one of my shiurim. They clip a minute from my shiurim. They don't ask me. They clip a minute from my shiurim. And then they sell it for like 12,000 sponsors. They make $1 million. And they put up 1 minute of me talking. And I'm like, my gosh, you can go to my website for free. But why? Because people don't want to listen to so much. People want to just hear a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes maximum. So he was giving me different ideas of various things that I talk about, which I could just turn into a little 3, 4, 5 minute video that people would love to watch. Just a little idea. So okay. There's this unbelievable opportunity, but that's nothing compared to the threat of AI. Listen to this story. I heard this story. I read it someplace. I didn't check it out. I'm not Pesach Kron, but I read this story, and it's mafchid. Listen to this story. This girl, gets a phone call from her mother. Meet me in such and such a place. She gets there, and there's some guy there waiting for her. He got ChatGPT to imitate her voice. And he called up and had it play her mother's voice so that she would come out. Everyone knows, I hope everyone knows, that I have an alter ego, and that is a character called Rabbi Sitter. And Torah Live with Dan Roth, we had him on the show, he spoke about it. Would make me an animated character, and we would have different scenarios, etc. So since I have to go into the studio and record, etc., so in the meantime, he had me record my voice, and now they can use my voice to make anything they want. Now, based on the jokes that ChatGPT came up with, I think my position is still somewhat secure. They're not at the point yet where they can actually replicate, my quirky sense of humor, but they have my voice down, and apparently they get me. They said the only thing we can't do is get your laugh. I don't know why it doesn't get your laugh down, but they can imitate my voice to the point where you can make any picture you want. And your mamish don't know what's emes and what's sheker. I can give you a picture of anybody doing anything you want. Now, this was driven home to me years ago, and I'm sure I spoke about this at the time when the person told me. I used to work out at the gym, and I didn't go to the gym yesterday, so that makes about 6 years. But I used to go to the gym, and one of the guys there was a photographer. And he said to me, I can do anything they want today. He says, I have Svardim who get married and ask me to make them more Aryan looking. I have a program that can make their features less Middle Eastern looking. He says, I can give you pictures of the chassan dancing with anybody you want. You know, you want to be dancing with Moshe Feinstein, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, the Chavetz Chaim. I can have a picture of you dancing with the Chavetz Chaim at your chasa. Anything you want. They drew up a little line drawing of the Lakewood Yeshiva to put on their stationery. And Rav Aaron Kotler looked at it and he said, "What's this tree?" He says, "What do you mean?" He says, "There's a tree on this side of the yeshiva, but there's no tree on that side of the yeshiva." He says, "Yeah, it's to give the picture symmetry." He says, "No, it's sheker. There's no tree there. Take the tree out." Amazing. But today, with AI, I can give you anything you want. I can create any reality you want. And you can move into this fantasy existence. So now, my son-in-law teaches in a yeshiva, and he said, by the Chanukah Masiba, I told the boys, you know, everyone has to come with a Dvar Torah. He says, and a few of the boys came with a very nice Dvar Torah, and I said, how did you prepare this? He says, ChatGPT. I said, I'm going to a Chanukah Masiba, I need a Dvar Torah this long on this topic, and it printed it right out for me. How does ChatGPT know who I am? That would fit Rabbi David Orlofsky's signature style, combining Torah insight, practical life guidance, and humor. Well, yeah, okay, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Which means eventually, no one's going to need me. They can, apparently, AI will reach the point where we can recreate almost anything. I remember this was a major thing when, for years, they would have these chess programs, and grand chess masters would defeat the program until at one point they came out with a program that was so good that it beat chess masters. What's going to happen? I mean, if somebody can go to AI and have them diagnose their illness better than doctors, so are people going to be turning to AI for psak? And ask them, is this mutter, is this asur? And I'll explain to you what I think is the frightening aspect of this. Yeah. Rabbi Simcha Skala was a Rav of a modern Orthodox shul in Brooklyn before he became the head of his major organization, Chai Lifeline. And somebody in the shul asked him whether he'd be allowed to do something, and he told them it was mutter. And then somebody else asked him the same question, and he said, it's asur. And the fellow was furious. And at the next board meeting, he wanted to pass a rule that the rabbi has to give the same answer to everybody. So who needs a rabbi? Who needs a rabbi? I'm sure I told this story years ago, that there is a shul on Long Island where they sent out a questionnaire to every member that was not supposed to be spread, but someone showed it to someone I knew because they were just horrified. They were firing the rabbi because they said he's too old. He had been there for 3 years. And he told me, he says, when they hired me, did they think I was going to get younger over the next 3 years? And if I seem to have aged quickly, maybe it's because of them. But they're going to hire a new rabbi. And they sent out a questionnaire. Do you want a rabbi who will A, raise the mechitza, B, lower the mechitza, C, keep it the same? Do you want the rabbi's wife to A, cover her hair, B, not cover her hair a little bit? Which schools do you think it would be okay for the rabbi to say? And this was the questionnaire. So who needs a rabbi? Especially today with AI. Get an AI rabbi. Get an actor to get up there and read whatever you write for him and say whatever you want him to say. There have been a number of times in my life when I've had major life decisions. And I remember I would speak to people and they say, well, if you go to this Paisik, he's going to tell you it's mutter. If you go to this one, he's going to tell you it's asur. If you go to this one, he's going to tell you this. They had the whole thing all worked out. And I never found that they ever gave me the answer that they told me, because they saw me as a person. They got into my essence. And you need a certain siyata d'shmaya. I think it was Rabbi Yochanan, if I remember the Gemara correctly, where he was standing outside of the Beis Medrash, and as everybody came out, he said, "What'd you paskin today?" He says, "I said this was mutter." And he said, "Why?" And he told him why, and he shlugged him up. And the guy says, "Oy vey, what's the psak?" He says, "No, it was mutter." And then he comes out, next guy comes out, he says, "What'd you paskin today?" I said, "This is tameh." He says, "Why?" He tells him the logic, and he shlugs him up. And he says, "What's the halacha?" He says, "Tameh." He says, "So what's pshat?" He says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives siyata d'shmaya to the poskim who are going to paskin the shalos for Klal Yisrael, that he's there to protect the Torah, and therefore it's considered an onesh if they get it wrong. As you know in the Gemara in Gittin, it says, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was asked by Vespasian, "What do you want as a reward?" He asked for three things. The Gemara says, why didn't he ask that he not destroy the Beis HaMikdash? And the Gemara gives two answers. One answer is, he was afraid that that was too much already and he'd end up with nothing. And the other answer is, you're right, made a mistake. Now, Kodesh Baruch Hu wanted him to make that mistake, obviously. So he made that mistake. It was a mistake that took place. But it wouldn't have happened if HaKadosh Baruch Hu was giving you siyata d'shmaya. There's a famous story with Moshe Feinstein where this woman comes to him and says, after the war, after World War II, I had aided him that my husband was dead. I went to this Rav, so-and-so, and he gave me a psak that I could get remarried. And I did, and I have children, and now my husband showed up. So Moshe looks at the lady and says, "Tell the story again." He says, "I was in Europe, I was in the camps, when I came out, I went to this Rav, I gave him my evidence, and he said I get remarried." He says, "Tell me the story again." And after 3 times he says, "You're lying." And she started crying, and she said, "I know, I thought my husband was dead, and I didn't think I had to ask anybody, and turns out he's alive." "But how did you know I was lying?" He says, "I knew that Rav, he couldn't make a mistake." You hear? Now, AI can't recreate that. Recreate that. Yeah, AI is not going to be able to do that for you. It's not going to give you that siyata d'shmaya. It's not going to... There's still something to being human. There's still something to the human brain when it comes to creativity that an AI system is not going to be able to capture. And so we're moving into very dangerous times because a muscle that is not used atrophies. There was a time when a person could take a receipt, a long receipt, and add it up in their head like this. Because those were the skills that they learned when they were in school. Today you ask a kid, what's 6 times 7? He pulls out his calculator, to look it up. Now, people don't even bother memorizing the times table anymore. What do I need it for? People don't think. They rely on technology to do everything for them. And that is scary, because if you don't learn how to use your brain, and I've said this many times, how many times you see a kid in shir, they're like, "Okay, Rabbi, let's see if there's anything you have to say that's going to interest me." It's depressing. It's depressing, and it's a metzius. So this is a challenge. How are we going to deal with it? The same way we do with every other challenge, without any idea whatsoever. Somebody told me once, a big person in chinuch, he says, when everybody had internet downloads, the yeshivas were asering music CDs. That's where they were up to. And the technology had morphed 3-4 generations later, and nobody was up for it. Nobody has thought these things through and how we're supposed to deal with it. And just doesn't work. So how do we face these challenges? Understand, I have no answers to this question. But Elon Musk is talking about putting a chip in your brain to be able to enhance your ability to think and to be able to do things and to remember stuff, and it's going to interact with your brain. What does that do? I was in Toronto, I don't know how many years ago it was, and I was talking with Rabbi Dr. Nosson Westrich, who I had the schus of knowing when he was a regional director of NCSY. And he went on to become an actual psychiatrist, not a psychologist, a psychiatrist. And he said to me, I'm looking for an answer why anybody needs Musar anymore. Because anyone who has any kind of midah, I just have to give them the right drug and I can change them into whatever I want. I can change their personality, I can alter whatever I want, I can use drug therapy and make people into anything. So what does that mean when we say people have to change their midos? Because the times they are a-changin', as this Jewish guy once sang, Robert Zimmerman. Yeah, the times are changing, and they're going faster and faster. And we have to try to think ahead and anticipate. Yeah. And that's why when the Chachamim would make a gezerah, make a takana, they were looking ahead. They were looking not for this dar, but for the next dar, and the dar after that, and what's going to be. And how do you take this into account? And you have to think ahead. You have to be able to look ahead. And this is posing a challenge that, trust me, the outside world doesn't even know how to handle. And alachas v'kama, the Jewish world, and Mirza Hashem, we need siyata deshmaya to be able to figure out, to have our Gedolei Torah navigate these very difficult times. And that's it for this week. If you want to find out more about my show, you can go to my website, RabbiOrlofsky.com. You can sign up for one of the online shiurim. You can download articles. You can ask a question, make a comment, sponsor an episode. And that's it for now. Until next time, I am David Orlofsky, and this has been the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. The Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode, and we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Till next time, till we meet again. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.